Finally. Here it is.
You know it's July when there are articles ranking players throughout the National Football League. The Chiefs fared well in some. We're going to talk about that and the Houston Texans. Let's go.
This is KC Sports Network, proudly presented by Emprise Bank.
It's a live edition of the KC Laboratory presented by Emprise Bank, member FDIC, our partners in Possible here at KC Sports Network, an absolutely wonderful company. If you are looking for any banking needs whatsoever, that is who you should call first. And if I needed a bucket hat right now, Maddie Lane would be who I called first, rocking a bucket hat for those listening, audio only. Maddie, I'm fairly certain I was there when you purchased that bucket hat.
You were. At first, I had regrets I didn't get the small bucket hat, like the little bucket. But then as longer time has gone, I'm glad I got the floppy. I'm glad I got the floppy bucket hat. This bad boy does work out here in summertime. And the reason we got this on, one, we had some great hat discourse to start the last show that we did, right? And so we had to continue that. But two, and like this is the big thing, people start reporting tomorrow to Chiefs training camp.
Let's go.
It's happening tomorrow. Quarterbacks and rookies are coming. So we had to dust off the old training camp bucket hat. We had to get ready. You're going to go out there. You're going to stand in the sun the whole time. You better be ready. You get that bucket hat on. You protect everything. You keep the sun out of your eyes. You're ready to fly. So I'm here. I'm ready for this.
I'm trying to remember which training camp you bought that hat. It was either the first one we ever went to together, or it was the first KCSN one.
It was the KCSN one.
Okay, and that was the year that BJ gave us a bunch of cards, KCSN cards to hand out at training camp, and you started like they had a QR code and stuff to subscribe and all that stuff, and you started putting them by the condiments, by the hot dogs. I think you put a few in a porta potty or two.
Oh, yeah.
You were spraying cards left and right.
Listen, you're going to give me like 350 little cards to pass out with QR codes on them. I'm going to hand them to people. But after a while, there's not enough people that I can hand them to when there's like 4 or 5 people trying to hand them out. So guess what? I'm going to start dropping them at the hot spots. We're going to the condiments right next to your ketchup. You want some ketchup on your hot dog? Guess what? You're going to look at a KCSN card. You want to get a little bit of mustard? You want a napkin? KCSN card. Oh, you got to go take a leak real quick? KCSN card, inside and outside of the porta potty. It's a numbers game.
It is a numbers game. It's absolutely. I mean, BJ printed like 1,500 cards, and I mean, BJ's never going to listen to this. I had 350 cards sitting in my car for years. Like the QR code probably expired. It was like probably a temporary QR code that we didn't have set up for an extended period of time. QR code had probably already expired, but I definitely had like half a box of those business card size cards in my car for like literal years. I sold my car like last year and I found them. So that tells you how old those were. That's how long I've had those for. But yeah.
Wasn't allowed to plant strategically around St. Joe and the Chiefs training camp facilities. Those are the ones that I was told to not continue to place in random places.
Well, yeah, BJ was very specific about hey, let's not try to like do something stupid with it. And then, you stuck it in a porta potty.
One person says stupid, another person says a stroke of genius. I don't know.
I don't know. I don't know how anybody made their first million by sticking stuff in porta potties. That's all. I just, but I do appreciate the willingness, willingness to go that far, I guess. But thanks everybody hanging out with us tonight. We are very excited. Yes, Patrick Mahomes, which is really the most important report. He will be in St. Joseph, Missouri tomorrow. I can't believe we are already here. I mean, it looks like the Mahomes have been living it up. I saw they were in Amsterdam with Travis and Taylor Swift, like just, enjoying things right up until the last minute, just really, getting their time in, biding their time. So good for them. But yeah, everything starts in earnest tomorrow with a lot of the younger players and the quarterbacks reporting back from camp. And so I can't wait for that. We will obviously be breaking stuff down here on KCSN as things are happening. As storylines begin to develop in St. Joseph in the heat. And I can't wait for that. So make sure you're checking everything out we got going on here at KCSN. Okay, Matthew, I know something that was really on your heart, something that you really wanted to talk about today, were ESPN's rankings of the Chiefs' best players. So the floor is yours, my friend.
Oh, so I mean, every offseason, different media outlets do their different top 100s, top whatevers of any positions. And ESPN always does like the NFL's executives, coaches, and scouts, right? And like we don't actually know who votes on these, but they are claiming it as people directly from the NFL and not players. And so you hope that takes away a little bit of the bias of like, hey, that guy cooked me or whatever in this game. So it's always a fun little one to go through. And so after a long summer, we're getting close enough to real football, but this is one of the fun, I think, offseason things that happen. We'll get the NFL top 100 coming soon. I know Patrick Mahomes just won some awards last week, probably should have won some more. So this is something I wanted to do. And so we're just going to start real quick right off the top. 3 Chiefs were named the best player at their position in the NFL. Do you want to take any guesses on who those are, Kent? They seem pretty hard.
I'm going to guess Patrick Mahomes. Also, I'm going to guess Travis Kelce, a player that you are not allowed to name in the non-Mahomes MVP when we do our game previews. And also, I will go out on a limb and say Christopher Jones, the defensive tackle.
You did a great job reading the headline of the show. And so, those guys were all first overall. I don't think there's a lot of intrigue, I guess, going through 2 of those names. Patrick Mahomes was almost a unanimous first place. There was 1 first place vote for Josh Allen, and Mahomes was second on that person's ballot, whoever Brandon Bean that was. And so we can talk about Patrick Mahomes being just like unequivocally the best quarterback in the NFL, according to everyone's mind, and it not even being close, if we want to dilly on that for a second.
No, we're good. I mean, we're good. He is the greatest afterthought in the history of you just said it and forget it. You don't even have to worry about it.
Yeah, no, exactly. And I agree. And so then Chris Jones also was quite easily the number 1 defensive tackle. I don't have the exact number of votes, but only one other defensive tackle even got a single first place vote. And he got the vast majority of them. I believe his lowest ranking was second. So he was pretty far and away the best defensive tackle, according to NFL executives, scouts, and coaches. And that makes sense because Aaron Donald retired. And that's the only guy. And like Chris Jones was the only guy even close to competing with him for that first place vote. Do you have anything you want to add to Chris Jones being first overall by a wide margin?
Yeah, one thing about Chris Jones that I don't know if we spend enough time talking about is I know the contract has been made a big deal and people worry about the long-term ramifications of paying a defensive tackle at 33 years old. But we're probably still going to get elite defensive tackle play this year and hopefully next year. And then he ages gracefully. Hopefully he just ages gracefully. But yeah, we are still he's at the end of his prime potentially, but this is still peak Chris Jones that we were talking about, and it's a good thing to have him. And you heard the New York Giants talking about him this offseason and how he is just still the best defensive tackle in football and all that. And I just think, hey, look, I know there's going to be talk about the contract and we'll see how it ages, but this is he's still this is how good he is, and he should be at the very top of the list. So that's all.
Yeah. And the only other person to get a first place vote was Quinnen Williams from the New York Jets, which I think that makes sense. I did want to say Quinnen Williams was second, Dexter Lawrence is third, Jeffrey Simmons fourth, and Justin Madubuike is fifth. All of those guys are 26 years old. Chris Jones is 30. There's some youth coming up at the defensive tackle spot. So I am curious to see how this voting shakes out next year. I don't expect Patrick Mahomes to lose his footing on the number 1 spot. Even with the bad year, I would expect by the Chiefs standards and his standards, I would expect him to be first pretty noticeably. Chris Jones, though, if he does have a down year with the age and then how young all those guys are, I could see his top spot lasting a little bit shorter. It could be a 1-year thing, the 1 year that Donald's gone, or not, or he could continue to dominate. I'm not saying he will. It's just, I was just notice the youth of the guys right behind him. Okay. Here's the big one though. Travis Kelce. He retakes the first spot for the tight end. He was not first last year. It was to George Kittle. I believe it was super close again. According to the article by Jeremy Fowler, a slew of late recorded first place votes pushed Kelce above Kittle. So it was really close. He got a lot of first place votes late. I think the most interesting part though, Kelce's lowest vote, somebody voted him as fifth, as the 5th best tight end in the NFL. I get it. Coming off last year, you have hesitations about saying he's the best or even the second best because you want to buy into the youth and you think maybe you saw a decline coming. But fifth, that's a lot of tight ends you're putting over Travis Kelce still, where I don't know if I can get on board with that.
So you said some late arriving ballots here, huh? Are we
Uh-huh.
sure? Are we sure the Swifties didn't hack into ESPN and make sure
Oh, okay.
that their guy didn't get it? No, I think
Possible.
he was really like I think did we talk about this recently? But like he was really good down the stretch, like elite down the stretch, and the injury probably put him behind the eight ball and made some optics and some perspective on him change a little bit differently. Yes, he is an older player that is, probably, I don't know how much longer he's going to be able to sustain this kind of success, but I think just how that season went last year really affected our perception of still the best tight end in football. And when you saw what he did to Fred Warner at the end of that Super Bowl and some of the plays that he was able to make, he looked like he was 28 all over again. And yeah, I no qualms with placing him at the top of the list. Yes, I'm biased, but I mean, look what he was doing at the end of the year. If he stays healthy, who's to say he won't continue to do what he's doing for another few years?
Yeah, and so of those three guys, I think Kelce's the most likely to fall out of the first place spot as quickly as of next year. And again, not saying he will or won't, but he was in the closest battle already with Kittle. I think there's a fair chunk of guys right behind them when you're going to look at guys like who came in third was Mark Andrews returning from injury. Sam Laporta, you would expect to only get better. TJ Hawkins is actually injured. So maybe there's only a couple guys that are really going to challenge him. It's really just Kittle, Laporta, and maybe Mark Andrews. It's not like there's a lot of guys ready to really challenge that top tight end spot, which is, again, crazy how somebody got him as fifth. But he does seem to be a guy that might be the most likely to fall down. Now, those are the guys that were first. I got a handful of other guys, though, that got votes. I did all the positions. We don't have wide receivers, linebackers, or cornerbacks yet. I do expect that, at least Trent McDuffie would get some cornerback votes, if, maybe not the top 10, but close to.
Why
and then
not?
Off-ball linebackers. We'll get to it here in a second. And then off-ball linebackers, I bet Nick Bolton probably falls somewhere on that list as well when those do come out. But Isaiah Pacheco, he got an honorable mention. He got some votes. He got 13th-ish overall is roughly where I would put him. They, kind of about the 13th. He was the 13th name listed. I don't know if honorable mentions are in order of the points they received, but he wasn't even in the others getting vote section. He was an honorable mention, which means he was pretty close to the top 10. I thought that was a little surprising, I think, given how the ebbs and flow of his game seemed to go week in and week out, which I know was a byproduct of the Chiefs offense, but it also seems like the Chiefs do struggle to center an offense around him consistently. So I was kind of surprised he was in a group with a Kenneth Walker, Aaron Jones, Alvin Kamara, James Cook. Like those guys seem to have offenses that have been centered around them a little bit more frequently than the Chiefs have Pacheco.
Yeah, I mean, yes, but also like I could see him garnering the same level of respect in that wheelhouse of names. I think, like I don't think it's completely out of the realm of possibility that, that they perceive, Isaiah Pacheco's role similar to what James Cook provides, for instance. Like I think James Cook is a good player, but like I could see, some people appreciating and valuing his ability as a runner differently than some of those guys. So I don't think it's entirely out of the realm of possibility that he's garnering that interest. Like I like him for what he is, but I think there's a lot of coaches that probably, and personnel people that probably love his game and the way he plays the game too. Like there's something to be said about how violently he runs the football, the amount of effort he gives, the willingness as a blocker, pass protector to do anything that his team asks him to do. And when you look at it from that context, the people that are making this determination, it maybe not always be the statistical side of it. It's just, the tape. And I could see some people really appreciating his game and wanting to show him some love. So like, I'm not entirely shocked that he got a little bit of love in that regard.
Yeah, no, that makes sense. And so speaking of guys that are getting a little bit of love that maybe was a slightly surprising, Trey Smith so all three Chiefs interior offensive linemen made the top 10 list. Okay. And that's pretty crazy because last year, I guess Trey Smith was honorable mention last year. And I believe Creed Humphrey came in at 8th, and then Joe Thuney was 2nd. So they all went up. Well, the last two, Trey Smith, comes in at 8th or 9th. Creed Humphrey comes in at 7th. Joe Thuney falls a couple spots to 4th, but they said the voting that it was all really close between the top guys in front of him. So 4th, 7th, 9th. But here's what really caught my eye out of that. Trey Smith got a high vote of 4th. There was somebody that voted him as the 4th best interior offensive lineman in the entire NFL. Creed Humphrey also caught a first-ranked vote as his highest, which I get. Joe Thuney got a 2nd. So people around the league are high on the Chiefs interior. I don't think we need to spend a lot on Creed Humphrey or Joe Thuney. I think those ones are pretty obvious, pretty self-explanatory. You remove Creed Humphrey's poor snapping. I think it even says it in the article. Somebody mentions if that goes away, he probably goes up even higher. Trey Smith, though, that one caught me off guard. And even more so is just kind of reading the way Fowler talked about it and coming from what people are saying. It seems like people like the dimension that he brings to the Chiefs offense. They like the power element. They like the nasty that Trey Smith provides. And it seems like he's kind of getting a little bit of a boost for just being a little bit of an outlier. Just because he is such a physically imposing player, it seems like there might be some gaps in his pass protection. There might be some big swings and misses in the run game at times, but people really like the upside of what he does more so than I guess I would have anticipated going into this article.
Well, it's kind of, I don't want to say it's entirely what we talked about with Pacheco, but I think there's appreciation for how he plays the game and the style of player that he is, right? And yes, there are some holes in how he plays the game, but when you're looking at, a physical, high effort player, a smart football player too, yeah, maybe he gets a little bit out of position at times in pass protection. His feet aren't always as quick as you'd like them to be in some certain situations, and he can get beat. But man, it's probably the same thing we're kind of talking about here: toughness, physicality. There's an appreciation for the way in which he plays the game, and I don't know. He's gonna get paid this offseason. Like all three of these guys, I mean, it's crazy how good of an interior offensive line that the Chiefs have put together in a short amount of time. And not in a short amount of time, just for this window of the Mahomes era. But yeah, I'm a little surprised Trey got the kind of love he did, but I mean, again, I think it's the kind of, I think that's just kind of like the personnel side kind of showing themselves a little bit.
Well, and it's a position that they're going to have guys of all different types. So like this part was from Joe Thuney, a NFC executive, said, I know he's good, but there are a lot younger, more explosive players that you could do more with in an offense. And like, I don't think you can disagree with that about Joe Thuney. I think Joe Thuney does allow you, especially as of 2 years ago, when he was still a little bit younger, he allows you to do a lot because of his mobility, because of his versatility and where you can get out in space. But there are definitely other guys in the NFL that aren't as good as Thuney, that aren't as consistent, but that can give a new layer to this offense. And so I think Trey Smith's that kind of guy. An NFC executive also said that, he might be number 1 for him eventually, which is just crazy. But when you talk about it from, well, can I focus my offense entirely around this player? Trey Smith does kind of have that. You can build a running game around what you can do with Trey Smith. Now, he's also a guy that's going to be relatively scheme specific. And somebody else that wrote in there, hey, if he was in a gap scheme only, he'd probably be even higher, or you might have people that are even higher on him because he's only going to be doing his strength. So I can see how we got there. I just was a little surprised of it.
Yeah, I'm a little bit too, but I think it kind of speaks to, like, if he does wind up hitting the free agent market, there is going to be a team that is willing to pay him as if he is one of, if not the best, interior offensive lineman in football. Wouldn't surprise me in the slightest.
All right, we got 2 more. Justin Reed got an honorable mention. So top 15, but not top 10. It doesn't mention how close or anything they got, but even just kind of reading the write-up, it was just a little bit of like, hey, he's really good. He does a lot of little things really, really well. He's a great football player, but we don't, it's almost like he doesn't do enough to stand out to make it higher up on this list, was kind of my reading of that. But are we surprised that Justin Reed would be top 15, but not top 10 at all?
No, that sounds about right. Like, I think his top moments, his high level moments, put him in the top 10. Like, he's had flashes of being a top 10 safety in some big moments, but I would say from a consistency perspective, you may not put him in that regard. So like, I can understand that.
All right. And here's the last one. I saved this one for the end because I think this one is worth a little bit of a discussion here. The edge rankings. George Karlaftis didn't get a single vote, not a single vote. Okay, and now you think off the top of your head, okay, they're only voting for the top 10 guys, so I can see a very easy path that George Karlaftis isn't even like in the conversation right now for a top 10 edge rusher in the NFL, right? Like, I think that's a fair assessment to say. Yeah. But here's some guys that received a vote, just a vote to being in the top 10. This version of Joey Bosa, whatever that is, Jonathan Grenard, Kayvon Thibodeau, Alex Highsmith, Jadeveon Clowney, Josh Sweat, and Trayvon Walker all got at least one vote. George Karlaftis didn't get one. If you look through this entire list, if you go through the top 10 and then the honorable mentions and then players getting votes, this puts George Karlaftis outside the top 25 edge rushers in the NFL. Now, they're not ranking 1 through 25, so it's not fair to say that. These are guys, some of these guys might have high-end traits like a Josh Sweat. Great pass rusher, maybe somebody threw him in at 10th because they like the speed rush that he provides or something like that.
Mm-hmm.
I can understand that the specialist aspect, but there's 25 names on this article about the edge rushers, and George Karlaftis, not a single mention.
Yeah, I think it kind of speaks to some of the stuff we talked. Like, is he a top end pass rusher where you are putting him one-on-one on an island and he's going to win consistently and be treated and regarded as one of those elite pass rushers? I'm not sure about that. If you are looking at a high level effort guy that plays the run well, that works hard, is going to give you 80, can run 80% of the snaps all day and find some production because of it. Like that's George Karlaftis. So he's kind of a weird case where he's been productive. He's played a lot of snaps. He hasn't flashed like an elite pass rush ability quite yet. And maybe that's what's knocking him a little off the peg here. But I don't know. Some of the guys that Alex Highsmith, I'd rather have George Karlaftis than Alex Highsmith 10 out of 10 times.
Trayvon Walker, he's the number 1 overall pick. Like, that's cool, but like, what are we doing? And
that's
like,
a Trent Baalke. Trent Baalke voted for that. Is what happened.
I get it. Great athlete. Guess who's also a pretty darn good athlete? George Karlaftis. And then like this version of Jadeveon Clowney though, right? Like this guy, is he like, I don't know. It's just, it was interesting to me. And so like, I did start to think about it from the aspect of, okay, you're looking here and you're like, I got to put somebody at number 10. I'm going to throw a bone to a guy that I think does one thing really well. So maybe somebody watched Trayvon Walker and said, this is the best run defending edge in the NFL. Let me give him this 10th place vote. Maybe they look at Josh Sweat and pick, or Highsmith, and pick out like, this guy's one of the best speed rushers. Let's give him a vote. And like, I can maybe talk myself into some of those, but just to not get a single Karlaftis vote, I thought was surprising. But then I guess the all-around game that he presents without a single part of his play necessarily standing out at a quick watch, I guess it makes enough sense in this voting structure that he doesn't get there. But he's definitely a top 25 edge rusher in the NFL, right?
Yeah.
Like, there's not 25 guys that are better defensive ends than him.
He's an edge. Like we talked about this the other day. Like he's one of the 32 best defensive ends. He's an edge one on somebody's team. Maybe not a high-end edge one, but like, I think part of the issue might be if you're looking at like how many complete defensive ends really are there in the NFL? Like, are there even 10? And like you kind of said, are you grasping for straws a little bit about picking a trait, and what are you picking? So maybe it's the rush ability is getting a little bit more love, but like I think when you look at the body of work for him, kind of like how we talked about, maybe Pacheco got some love and appreciation for how he plays the game. George didn't get any of that, if that's the case, right? And I think it's a little bit of a different argument because running back is a little bit different, but like, I don't know. Let me see this in a year. Let me see this a year from now.
I think you're right. Cause like I could look at guys at here and say, okay, Jadeveon Clowney is probably a better pure run defender than Karlaftis. I could look at here and say that Bradley Chubb, when healthy, and Trayvon Walker, you could make an argument these guys are all better run defenders. So if you were going to give a nod to a guy that is a run defender first and then a pass rusher second, I can see how those guys would sneak in a 10th place votes. Like I got there after a while of thinking how the voting process works. It's just, I was a little surprised when I first opened that one up and saw Karlaftis outside, like I said, the top 25, essentially.
Do you have any more, or is that it?
That was it for now. We got wide receivers are coming up, cornerbacks are coming up, and off-ball linebackers. I don't imagine wide receivers will see anything. Actually, no, I take that back. Rashee Rice will probably get a vote. I don't know if he will be. I don't think he'll be in the honorable mentions, but I think he'll be in the others receiving votes. Coming off the year he did, somebody will be like projecting him to get better. Cornerbacks, Trent McDuffie will definitely show up, probably in the top 15. So either in the top 10 or the honorable mention section. And then off ball, like I already said, I think Nick Bolton's getting in there.
You are a top 5 bucket hat wearer in my book.
Let's go.
Yeah, we're going to take a break. We'll be back right after this.
We appreciate you supporting KC Sports Network by listening to our podcast. You have helped us become the highest ranked Chiefs podcast network in 2022 and 2023. And don't forget about our daily Substack newsletter, the best written analysis you can find on the Chiefs straight to your inbox every day. KCSN.substack.com.
I'm glad you wore the bucket hat as a bit to continue the hat discussion from last week. But
Let's go.
I was gonna make a comment before you put that on, that the hair was looking mighty nice coming into this thing. Flow, you got a little flow going. You're like, are you growing that stuff out? Like, how long are we growing this out for?
I don't know. It's doing its thing. We're gonna find out.
I
On the ride right now.
I would love for it to just, extend into September when I see you next. So
Maybe we'll see. We'll see. Here's the issue though: is like right now we're in a weird stage, where it's really long. It's getting long, but like it's not humid. Like you liked it when it was humid because you liked the top. Ooh, if I have a top, I gotta see what other kind of hats I can find around here. I need hats because the hair right now is real fluffy, especially like after showering in the evening and stuff before jumping on here. It's real fluffy and it doesn't, it looks like I'm out here looking like a chia pet, and that's not good for anybody.
we're gonna get some Corey Matthews hair before it's all said and done. That's what we're aiming for here. I don't know if you know. Do you know what Corey Matthews is?
Okay,
You know-
no, it's not that curly. It's not that curly.
Okay, we're getting there though.
It won't curl like that. It won't it won't be tight curls. It'll just be like, I don't know. This is about as long as my hair's ever been. So like you and I are going on this adventure together right now, Kent.
Well, I would love to find out. Are you going to training camp this year?
I'm trying to figure that out too.
Okay.
I can't
me
be
know.
locked in one way or the other yet. I'm considering.
I mean, you've also got something in September you're coming up for, I believe, as well.
I am doing that, but yeah, I'm considering. Maybe I got to look at the schedule again. But yeah, I'm considering.
So we might be able to get you out here twice in the next couple months, is what I'm hearing.
That's what it sounds like.
Looking forward to that. All right, we are almost done with this season preview. We've got 2 teams left, and this week we are talking about the Houston Texans.
Woo.
Kansas City Chiefs will be playing them the end of the year. They are your week 16 opponent at home. It's a noon game. I wonder if this game gets flexed. Like this might be a game that gets flexed depending on how things are going, especially when you talk about the quality of this roster. Matthew, how do you frame this team
Can
up?
it get flexed? Isn't this weird schedule wise and timing wise? I feel like this might be kind of set in stone. Maybe I'm wrong.
I don't know.
Yeah, it's a Saturday, right? This is one of those weird. I don't think it's a Sunday like where it can be moved. Anyway, Houston Texans roster, it's good. There's a lot of really flashy players on this. It's a very good roster. I think a lot of position groups are more solid than great, though. Like, I think they're going to be one of the hottest teams for people to pick in the NFL and for the NFL, like as a sleeper or taking the next step this year. And I get why. And I'm not saying I disagree, but I do think we've gone a little too far with how good the overall roster is. They are not this team that should be a lock to be making the AFC Championship game or competing with the teams at the top of the AFC, just no matter what, because I do think that there is a fair amount of solid to this team, specifically on the defensive side of the ball or even the offensive line versus great. Like they are very good across the board, but and then they have like elite in some spots. Their wide receiver room, I think their quarterback's going to be great. Their pass rush could be really good, but I think there's enough, just good, not great to say they might be a step down still from the Chiefs, normally I guess I would put the Bills there, but I guess not anymore this year, but like from teams like the 49ers, from some of the other teams where we talked about, even the Browns. I would say outside of quarterback, the Browns roster top to bottom is better overall than this one because they have better players like at every position group, whereas the Texans just seem to have a lot of good and only a little great.
I think this is a very good roster, a very balanced roster with a lot of good players on the roster, but I don't know if there's like a huge giant weak spot on this team. I think what this group is looking to do and what the Houston Texans are doing is they're a little bit ahead of schedule, I think, obviously, with what they've seen out of CJ Stroud. And so they're continually building this team with young upside talent while, trying to put a competitor out because they are in some ways ready to take that next step and be one of the competitors the contenders in the AFC. And so while, there's a couple blue chips on this roster, I think the blue chip upside exists with the last couple of draft classes where, they're looking for Derek Stingley and Jalen Petrie to take steps. They're looking for Will Anderson to take a step. Tank Dell, wanting to, continually get, some these guys to just continue to ascend and get better and improve and achieve top tier status at some of these positions. That's kind of where the upside ability of this team exists. And so while it is a very good roster and there's a lot of really good young players, and candidly, the reason this team did what they did is because their young players kind of exceeded expectations. And if they continue to do that, good things will happen to this roster. And they've got one of the best quarterbacks in the National Football League already. I saw a picture of CJ Stroud, by the way. He's kind of on that Mahomes bod plan. Like, he ain't trying to get ripped. He's
just been traveling the world making fun of Micah Parsons at every stop.
That's a noble cause. So what do you think the quality of the staff is?
I'm okay. I mean, like, it's still too early for me to make a final judgment. I think early returns on Ryans and Slowick were really good. That first year was really good, but what happens when teams start to adjust? Now, it's not like DeMeco Ryans has a defense that nobody had seen before. It's obviously something that people have been seeing for a long time in San Francisco, but he had his own alterations to it. They did bring a little bit more pressure. They did mix things up a little bit more frequently. And Bobby Slowick, like all Shanahan guys, it's kind of the same stuff, cut off a tree with a little bit different fluff to it. I don't even know if they put much more to it other than CJ Stroud's actually good. So we can kind of do the Los Angeles Rams, Stafford can bail us out when our scheme doesn't work thing. Right. And so I think the coaching staff is good. I have no qualms with it. I just think, and this is going to kind of be a CJ Stroud point too, it's year 2. I want to see how teams adjust to what you guys had all the success with in year 1 before I make a final judgment to say that for sure CJ Stroud's going into that elite tier of quarterback. For sure that DeMeco Ryans is a home run of a head coach, that Bobby Slowick should be next in line to get head coaching interviews and the next big job. I want to see one more year where these guys have to adjust to the adjustments, especially because this entire coaching staff comes from a coaching tree that is, I don't want to say set in their ways, but is like very defined, right? The Shanahan coaching tree is very clear cut on what it is. Yes, guys change things up, but it's still structurally this lane. And DeMeco Ryans' defense comes from a tree that is structurally in this lane. They'll throw in a little curveball here and there, but structurally it's one thing. How do you react when teams start to figure that out? Because we saw the Seattle Seahawks, they bring cover 3 back to the NFL and make it this whole thing. Once teams started adjusting to that, though, they didn't have an answer when their guys could no longer just straight up win. They never were able to figure out Dan Quinn and anybody else coming, Gus Bradley, anybody else coming from that, never figured out how to adjust to it. So I just want to make sure they can adjust to the adjustments going forward.
I think it's fair. I do think it's a fair critique of this staff. I will say I'm more on the optimistic side than I am on the pessimistic side about what this team is going to be able to continue their success. I think DeMeco Ryans, stepped in and hit the ground running, and this team exceeded expectations and won a lot of football games. And I tend to bet on those kind of guys because, especially, getting a playoff win under your belt and being able to do that. Now, they definitely hit a ceiling. They hit a wall. I think, when they got into Baltimore and had to deal with that buzzsaw, and they blitzed the heck out of CJ Stroud, and CJ Stroud didn't handle it great. And they saw their struggles. And, there's some questions about the true drop back game that they're going to have to answer if they want to take that, quote unquote, next step in this whole thing, right? They need to, figure that out a little bit. So once they do, if they do, good things are going to happen and they're going to be able to continue to grow and progress. There's, I think, some new additions that help facilitate that a little bit. And we can talk about that here in a second. But overall, I do feel good about this coaching staff. I am optimistic that they will help make this team a real contender in the AFC. So what do you think about some new additions, Matthew?
They have a couple here to choose from. I'm going to go, I'll let you go first because I actually think mine's going to be a little bit tamer than whatever you're going to pick.
Interesting. You're going to go off the beaten path a little bit. Well, I mean, I'll talk about Stephon Diggs a little bit because I am fascinated to see how this kind of works out, right? That saga is bizarre. If you ask me, the Bills, they take their lumps and they move on from Stephon Diggs, and, they take the full brunt of the salary cap ramifications of moving on from him. And, hey, look, this is a team, quote unquote, in contention. The Buffalo Bills are in contention, and they're moving on from Stephon Diggs and taking their lumps, kind of like the Chiefs did with Tyreek Hill. Stephon Diggs was really, really bad in the second half of 2023. And the Bills traded him away. the Texans are expecting good things to come out of this move and acquiring him and giving up a second round pick. I like it for the Texans. I think it gives them, if Stephon Diggs is healthy, it's a year-to-year kind of situation essentially for them with him. If he plays out, if he pans out, this offense could be really, really good. It improves that drop back game as we were kind of talking about a little bit there. And if you get the Stephon Diggs that was playing at the beginning of this year and most of his tenure in Buffalo, you're getting a really good player that can help a young quarterback. How long that welcome lasts will remain to be seen. But I think Stephon Diggs he will I don't want to say he'll define how far this Texans team can go, because that's a little bit of a scary proposition trusting him entirely. But I do think he's a guy that can really kind of change this.
I was muted and it took me a second to get unmuted. Yeah, so I agree with that. Stephon Diggs is a good one. I figured one of us would have to talk about it, and that's why I didn't want to go first. I to just double down or jump on this real quick. Stephon Diggs makes a ton of sense for this team because when Tank Dell went down last year, they didn't really have a secondary answer from this offensive structure to Nico Collins. They didn't have somebody else to pair with Collins. And now I think Tank Dell might, I don't know how this is going to factor out wide receiver wise, target wise. It seems like CJ Stroud and Tank Dell do have a really good connection. So they might continue to get a lot of targets between the two, even with Diggs and Nico Collins in the mix. But I do think that Diggs gives you a little bit of insurance policy in case Tank Dell, who might I remind everybody is one of the smallest football players in the NFL. You think Xavier Worthy small, buddy. And so Tank Dell is one of the smallest guys. If he is hurt again, this gives them somebody that can do some of the same stuff. They can win in some of the same ways that Tank Dell did. So I like the move for that perspective. Kind of crazy how they made this trade to go all in on 1 year, but alas. I'm actually going to go to the other side of the ball. I'm going to go with Danico Autry. Defensive tackle / defensive end. He's been playing for the Tennessee Titans the past few years, and he has been absolutely 100% menacing the Kansas City Chiefs every time these two teams play each other. It has been one of the single most annoying players for the Chiefs to go up against because he always seems to power rush whatever tackle he goes up against right into Mahomes' lap. Anytime he stunts to the inside, he happens to catch a Trey Smith or Creed Humphrey either not looking or the swim move. He has just been a thorn in the side of the Chiefs for years when they play the Titans. He's now with the Houston Texans. And the good thing for him is he's listed as a D tackle. I think they do a little bit of odd front, even front mix-ups. They have some overhang guys, but Danielle Hunter, Will Anderson Jr., and then you're going to forget about Danico Autry in the middle. You're going to let that guy get a lot of one-on-one matchups with the stunts, the twists, the games, or just one-on-one with the guard. That's a rough matchup for a team that has not had the best of luck trying to block him. So I don't think he's going to come out and have a Pro Bowl type year, but he is a guy specifically to a matchup with the Chiefs that could be very annoying and actually play a relatively big role because he has in the past.
All right, players to watch, Matthew.
Oh man, there's a handful of guys on this team. I think I'm going to go with Derek Stingley Jr. I said that I think a fair amount of this team is good, but not great. And I think the secondary is one of those, Jalen Petre, Jimmy Ward, Desmond King, Jeff Okudah's maybe going to be good, but it's a good secondary, but not a great secondary. But it can become really, really, really good if Derek Stingley becomes what everybody thought he was as a freshman at LSU. If he can come in, be a lockdown corner that can also take the ball away and just be that guy. He can be a guy that essentially takes away your number one option that can also make plays on the ball when you do decide to challenge him. That takes what is a good secondary and allows them to play great because now all of a sudden you don't have to offer help to him. Now your other corners get all the help. Your safeties don't have to sit on top over him. So I think Stingley's good. Stingley had a good end to last season. I think he clearly is getting better, getting more comfortable in this scheme, in this system. I just think that he's still, a couple steps away from being the kind of corner that a lot of people thought he was going to be. But if he starts to become that guy this year, this defense goes again from a good defense to maybe a really good defense.
I'll talk about the edge rushers. I know I talked a little bit about Will Anderson, but I'll add Danielle Hunter in there too. I think, you talk about D'Amico Ryans. He's come from a defensive structure that typically has a lot of horses up front, and they like to have a lot of talent up on the defensive line. They build teams through that. So adding Danielle Hunter and, to a Will Anderson, I think is a really nice little addition to just kind of help bolster your pass rush. And that's what this defense wants to run through. If you even look at what they've done a little bit, they've got a Derek Barnett. They've got Jerry Hughes, there as well as complimentary rushers. And you can say what you want about them. Tim Settle along the interior as well. They've got some guys along that interior. They've got a relatively deep front. They're going to try to throw bodies at it. But it starts with Danielle Hunter, a really highly productive pass rusher that you're hoping can pair well with a Will Anderson, give you that 1-2 punch. And that, if things work out well for them, that's a pretty terrifying little group there. So, yeah. So, Matthew, how does this team beat the Kansas City Chiefs?
I mean, besides my cop-out answer of it's an AFC team playing the Chiefs late in the year, so the Chiefs are going to run out there with the most mundane offensive, structuring that you can. I think that, if we just remove that, if we say that this game fully counts, they have enough firepower on offense. We don't know what the Chiefs secondary is going to be at this point in time without Snead, without a Mike Edwards at this point of the year. We don't know how good or bad they will be going up and lining up against the Collins, Diggs, Tank Dell. Oh, don't forget they have Noah Brown, John Mechie, if he can ever rekindle some of the, second round hype that he had when he was drafted. Oh, Dalton Schultz, maybe not great, but a very functional tight end in the receiving game. They have a lot of weapons and a quarterback that, at least as a rookie, was very good at finding them, very good at operating this offense. Now, I do think that they don't do a great job of pressuring secondaries with all of those weapons, or they didn't last year. They didn't get empty. They didn't spread it out necessarily a lot. They didn't do a lot to threaten you with their number 3 or 4th receiving option on a play. It was a lot more out of play action. It was a lot more of the Kyle Shanahan stuff where you were going to design it up to get an open runner somewhere, and then that's the guy you're going to find. We've seen the Chiefs do good against that. We've seen the Chiefs do bad against that. Over the past 2 to 3 years, I think Steve Spagnuolo's kind of dialed in on this version of offenses in the NFL. Ignore the Packers game where Jordan Love did play out of his mind at times, and there was a lot of injuries for the Chiefs leading to some of those issues. But if you would look beyond that game, I think they've done a pretty good job against this style of offense. But I still could see the Texans with their firepower taking advantage of a Chiefs secondary. That pass rush gets to tee off a little bit later in the game because the Houston Texans are up and threaten the Chiefs' offensive tackles, which isn't as good as the interior. I could see a shootout here where the Texans edge out on top.
Yeah, I do think it's a shootout if it's going to happen, and then, the Texans making up enough plays up front to just kind of slow the Chiefs down a little bit. So the Houston Texans offense is rolling. The Chiefs aren't able really to stop them. And yeah, the defensive line for the Texans makes enough plays to kind of stall out some of the drives for the Chiefs. And that's kind of, I do anticipate if the Chiefs lose, it's going to be a high scoring game for sure. I'm a little bit I think D'Amico Ryans has done a fantastic job with that defense. And I think there's some good players on there, but yeah, it just remains to be seen if they're going to be able to piece it all together, put it all together front to back. All right. Non-Mahomes MVP for the Chiefs in this game.
Well, I mean, we've talked about a lot of different players for this team, but we have yet to mention their linebackers. So I don't think that Christian Harris, Azeez Al-Shahir, or Henry Tutu will be able to cover Travis Kelce, but I'm not going with him. That would be a good one, but I'm not going to go with him. I am going to go with Brian Cook. We talked a lot about the weapons for this team. We talked a lot about how this offensive structure works. If the Chiefs are going to slow down this defense, I think you're going to have to get a lot of really good safety play. Guys aren't going to be able to take the cheese when they get all the misdirection, when they get all the run looks. You're going to have to stay deep. You're the deep safety, which is Brian Cook's main role as a safety. If you're that deep guy, you're going to have to keep a lid on everything. You're going to have to showcase your range, make the right reads, keep on top of a Nico Collins or a Stephon Diggs as they try to get vertical down the field and force them to dink and dunk off this hard play action. That's not what the offense is designed to do. They're designed to get free runners downfield or leaking out of the backside. So good, strong safety play, specifically from Brian Cook, who I think would be playing the majority of the deep safety reps. Big game for him would go a long way in kind of forcing the Texans to execute play after play after play and move the ball down the field slowly, which wasn't what they were doing last season.
I could see them playing a little bit top down here, to your point. Like, hey, look, these linebackers, you want to, you might have to protect them a little bit as well. I'll take Rashee Rice in that situation, right? The vertical stretch threat of the Chiefs receivers, Rashee Rice working in the middle of the field in similar areas that Travis Kelce could be working as well. Give me Rashee Rice working underneath against this defense and making some big plays after the catch and some tough catches there. All right, what's the line? What do you think it is? Guess the line.
Where's this game?
It's in Arrowhead, Matthew.
3
days before Christmas Eve.
Chiefs 4.5. This is like this. Both teams are coming off short rest. And then, if I'm not mistaken, and then Christmas is following this, correct? Is that what we established here?
Yes, they play Wednesday.
And the Chiefs have another game. I think the Chiefs are going to have a good record. They're going to have the AFC West locked up. I know if they're in a tooth and nail battle for the first seed, maybe they'd press a little bit harder on this one. But I don't know. I feel like this could be one of the games the Chiefs come out really again with like a mundane thing. Teams are going to be thinking about that. Chiefs 4.5.
I'll go Chiefs 5.5, something like that.
No respect to the Texans.
Tucker D. Franklin says Chiefs are favored by 4.5 for this game already. So good job, Matthew. Wow, look at you.
Oh, I'm good at this. That's the hat.
The handy capper. That's going to do it for the KC
Tucker,
Laboratory. Thank you all so much. We love you. Catch you later.